You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 234, Winds of Plague, hosted by Dan Terry.
It's not that impressive, you know. I've heard at the gates too. I understand.
And Joseph Wren. It's like, let's grind and be brutal and throw down in the pit and swing our arms around because that's supposed to be dancing, even though it's not. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you decimate the weekend with brutal riffs and pizza, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Discography Discussion. And it is about to get windy in here.
So windy, so epic, so much fantasy. If you're hearing this band for the first time, you might say to yourself, this is a lot heavier than what I thought I was going to be listening to.
I actually disagree with that. I remember hearing Winds of Plague back in the day and thinking it was the heaviest band that I had ever heard in my entire life. And maybe it had been at the time. I mean, this is a long time ago. I mean, not that long, I guess like 11, 12 years. I was definitely listening to stuff like death metal, but this is before the whole deathcore thing was like a household name. It was about to be like a year later. But Winds of Plague was one of those bands that was like, yeah, we like being heavy, but you know, any band can be heavy. So why don't we throw in some of those wonderful fantasy epic keyboards into the mix and see what happens. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And let me be clear, when I say heavier than what you're expecting, I look at these records and say to myself, this is going to be power metal. This is going to have some Celtic instruments incorporated into the music. There might even be some elves dancing here and there. It's going to be frosty. But what I get is this bro-influenced, just beat the shit out of everyone at the fucking gig. And I'm into it. It's exactly what I was looking for this week, and it challenged a lot of the notions you get from looking at artwork like these albums have. It contradicts the vinyl experience if that is sitting down and looking at this album and dissecting every single piece of it. You're not going to get what you're expecting with this band, but what you do get is some of that heavy as shit, beat down feeling music that's got some fantasy elements in it, guys. Surprise. You're welcome.
It has the fantasy sound, that's for certain. I don't know about lyrically. This is a band that I honestly, it's not that I don't pay attention to lyrics or not, but I was just having such a good time, you know, slamming down with the riffs and the keyboards.
Absolutely.
I kind of got lost in it. Yeah, I got lost in it, and I didn't really, it didn't feel to me like I needed to necessarily know what they were talking about because it was great music to listen to while playing Dynasty Warriors on PS2.
Very nice.
Like 100%. Yes, it was absolutely incredible. And so I had a really good time with Winds of Plague. I remember hearing them back whenever I was younger. And, you know, I was actually at a college course where we were cutting our own videos together. As you guys can see, you know, I still need a little bit to go on that because, you know, with these, but we had to cut a video together and I was doing it on like Windows Vista or something like that. Maybe it was Windows 7, I can't remember, but I was probably using a Vista laptop. But I was trying to use Windows Movie Maker to cut a video together. Trust me, everybody, use DaVinci Resolve. It's way better. But I will say, you know, one of the assignment was basically to cut pictures of your life or to try to tell some sort of story. So most people did like an autobiographical kind of slideshow with pictures with music behind it. And I thought that I was going to be the badass in the room, and I put my music as The Betrayers by A Plea for Purging, you know, because I wanted it to be heavy. I wanted everybody to know what I was about, and so I threw that song on there.
You wanted to make them say, right?
Yep, and then this other student who couldn't have been more than 3 feet tall, very quiet. I don't think she spoke a word to anybody the entire time, but her video, well, the soundtrack was done by Winds of Plague. And I was like, wow, so I am not the most metal person in the room right now. But that's okay. You know, I can handle it. But I remember hearing that Winds of Plague song, and I don't remember specifically which one it was, but it was brutal. It had the breakdown. It had the deathcore drop, you know. It had the indistinguishable vocals. It was everything that you'd want out of a deathcore song. So I've always been interested in Winds of Plague, but I haven't been like 100% familiar with everything that they do. And so I'm really glad that I've gotten myself familiar over the past couple of weeks.
By the way, what's your favorite Dynasty Warriors game? Dynasty
Warriors 2.
Is it a superior game to Dynasty Warriors 5?
I don't know. I haven't played 5. Is 5 your favorite?
It's exactly the same game.
I was going to say that. It's also worth noting that I played Hyrule Warriors on the Wii U. I know these are all old games because I'm an old person, but the Hyrule Warriors game was Dynasty Warriors, except you're Link, but it's the same game.
Does it have the same death animation for the final boss of the level?
I don't know.
Drops to his knees. I'm gonna get my revenge after I come back to life.
I want to say that he does drop to his knees in Hyrule Warriors, now that I think about it. But you guys probably aren't here to hear us talk about video games. We have a whole other channel for that.
Well, before Dan and I die lucky, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We're on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, we do enjoy our 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. And the reason we enjoy them is they make me feel good. They make Joe feel good. And we love them. And I want to share one with you guys right now. So I'm just gonna pull this guy up right here. We got a 5-star review from the Super Sammy 67. Super Sammy says, amazing. Thanks for sharing great content. Please do a Flot, Overkill, and Blindside episode. The attention to detail and intricate knowledge is great to hear. Thank you. I wouldn't necessarily say it's intricate knowledge, but we've been listening to metal for a couple of minutes, so we get through it. But one of the recommendations that you gave us was Blindside, and I've got great news for you. We actually already have a Blindside episode that we did. I don't remember exactly what year it was. It was a couple of years ago now. But if you go to discussmetal.com and you search for Blindside, it will come up. We talked about every record, and Blindside, unfortunately, has been rather inactive lately, so they haven't really put anything out. But that's all right. That makes the episode far more timeless.
Also, Overkill, you don't have to ask me twice.
We have been jumping into our thrash quite a bit lately, and even dipping into some other stuff that I wasn't as comfortable with. Def Leppard, but here we are. But yeah, Overkill, yeah, that's happening. I don't think that's anything we have to even push back too far. We can make Overkill happen anytime we want. Are you ready?
Are you ready? So Dan, tell me about Winds of Plague.
I thought you were never going to ask.
I did hold off on it for a bit.
What's that?
I did hold off on it for a bit.
You did. I thought I was sitting there. I was sitting there sweating with anticipation, and I'm glad that we brought it up. So, Winds of Plague is a band from California. Most of the internet describes them as a heavy metal band, but I'm going to be the genre police here for a minute and say that Winds of Plague is most definitely a deathcore band at its base. They're definitely more deathcore overall than they are anything else. But I think what separates a band like Winds of Plague from, say, like a Whitechapel or an Impending Doom would be they are obsessed with melody. Whenever I say melody, I don't mean they're like a melodic band. I mean like they're like obsessed with like intricate guitar melodies, at least on some albums. But the biggest melody maker in this band is the keyboard. This is a deathcore band that takes their keyboarding very, very seriously. These guys have been around since 2002, if you can believe that. And it took them quite a while before they got their first record out in 2008. And Winds of Plague is a band that I think a lot of people have a lot of respect for, a band that a lot of people remember from back in the day. I will say that I don't think they necessarily got the acclaim that they probably deserve. There were a lot of deathcore bands that came out after Winds of Plague that I thought were significantly worse. So we're gonna do our best to celebrate these guys tonight.
There's definitely some bro in this, but it is a product of the times. The sound, the intensity, the riffs, it's all here. And while the band has some more hardcore dancing moments than others, in general, the riffs, the speed, it's got the thrash feeling, it's got the energy. That's what I'm here for. I just get a little extra with the other stuff, and it's time for 2008's Decimate the Week. So
I mean, let's decimate
epic.
them. Let's decimate them. I mean, this is the cover says it all, right? I mean, you got a samurai up there. He's got some gore on his swords. You've got a proto version of the unrecognizable band logo up top. I mean, these guys were doing it before anybody was doing it, really. And this is by far my favorite Winds of Plague album, just because I like the keyboard usage. I like how over the top they are with it. Some people might even say excessive. I'm not trying to do a backhanded compliment here, I promise. But I will say that, like, this record has a sense of melody that I think the other ones somewhat flirt with, but don't realize it fully like they do on this record. This record is all about those harmonized guitar leads, and they've got a lot of really cool gnarly noodling going on here. And it's not the most memorable thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, I've heard bands do things like this before. I can't confirm if they did it before Winds of Plague, but I hear a little bit of like what you'd get from bands like Hope for the Dying out of this. And there's another band called Vanguard, who I don't think ever actually went anywhere. They released a record called Eric and Ivor that reminds me a lot of this one, but that one had like a story. Like this is the better record out of the two, just because it's a little bit more focused. I mean, it gets in and gets out at like 36 minutes. But this one is decidedly more metal than the band was going to be later on in their career. And I think that this album in particular might be the truest realization of what the vision was, which was to have epic deathcore songs that had more substance to them than just the breakdown. Like, this record has breakdowns on it, and I think sometimes they're a little strangely implemented in that, like, all the cool stuff that's going on at the same time will kind of drop out, and then they'll play their breakdown, and then they'll go back into the song. So they do get better at that as they go on as a band. But this first record, I think, is a really, really great first start for them. And I find it the most enjoyable because it's so fresh. There's that potential in the band that you hear, and you can't wait to see how they're gonna do it the second time around.
The attention to metal concepts is strong on this album. Yes, it's 2008 metal, and you have the definitive, or at least what I would call the stereotypical deathcore sounding vocals, almost mashed potato mouth. But then there's keyboards, and it starts to sound more like a classic metal album. You put those things together, that's something that was missing in 2008. Clearly, it wasn't missing because Winds of Plague was doing it. But you're still going to get the over-the-top dirges in places. So this might be the vision, but it's also a bit random at times. I think that's what's expected when you're listening to this type of deathcore. You want it to be random, but you also don't want it to stop doing that awesomely epic sounding riff that built the song up to this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that was a problem with deathcore bands kind of back in the day, and even a problem with deathcore bands now, is the songwriting isn't always there as far as being able to write parts that people are going to enjoy hearing and keep the momentum up. I think there are a lot of people out there that are like, yeah, let's just implement the breakdown as quickly as we can so that everybody gets dancing in the pit. But I'm the kind of guy that, and don't get me wrong, I haven't been in a pit in several years, but if I were in a pit, I would definitely want to keep the pace up and not so much just like the slam of it. If that's a good way to describe it, it's just the slam of it. But what I do like too is that, like, what I think is unique is that these guys have a very metal kind of foundation, with the guitar. They got, the lead guitar, the rhythm guitar, and and the keyboards, and they create a sense of melody and epic song structure. But then they're also not afraid to throw in their hardcore influences, where you'll throw out into like a yelled, almost gang vocal, and the pace will pick up in only that way that tough guy hardcore can. And so I really like hearing that element in it because it kind of grounds me. It sometimes pulls me a little bit out of the fantasy world of it all, but I like it because I'm a fan of that meathead beat down bro stuff. So yeah, the bro is very strong with this one.
2009, The Great Stone War.
All right, so we're back with epic covers. That's for certain. Great Stone War actually starts off very interestingly with like a spoken word passage. I like how this band has like a minute-long intro for each record to kind of set it up. And you jump into this one and you start noticing kind of off the bat that like it absolutely has all of the staples that the first record had, but it is decidedly more deathcore. It's more in your face. It's a little bit more, the breakdown and the hardcore, and a little bit less epic fantasy. And that's not to say that doesn't exist on this record, but it's almost like they're just focusing on different aspects of their sound now. They're not doing anything really different than what they did before, but they're kind of just focusing on one area more so than the others.
You get these power metal sounding intros, and in a way, that is a disappointment that the album doesn't deliver that type of epic, but it gives you the 2009 version of epic. So this band has been around now for 7 years, rapidly releasing album number 2. Hindsight tells us that the deathcore thing is just not going to stick around forever, guys, so go right ahead and put it out. But this one embraces a little more of the grind. It almost sounds harsh in places when you're listening to it. And I don't mean deathcore harsh, like the vocals are layered and there's so many extra background over-the-top screaming growls that you're expecting with deathcore. This one almost sounds cassette tape harsh, almost like a classic heavy metal record or even black metal from the 90s, where it has that abrasive quality to it, except you're listening to deathcore.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely making musical decisions that separates them from the rest of the pack. And as we go on in their discography, we're going to find that they don't do a whole lot, though, to differentiate themselves from themselves, which is that double standard that all metalheads live by, where, don't change, but I don't like that all your records sound the same, right? We talked about that ad nauseum on the Black Dahlia murder episode, and a great band, but you only need to buy one record. And I don't think that Winds of Plague is that repetitive by any stretch. I think they just the first record was kind of flirting with the idea of being more deathcore, but it almost seemed tacked on on the last record. Whereas this record, they're writing kind of more deathcore songs, but they are adding enough elements from traditional death metal, from hardcore, from mellow death, metalcore, and you've still got the keyboard, you've still got kind of that epic feeling. But I don't necessarily get as much of like a power metal fantasy sort of vibe off of this. Is the record good? Absolutely. It is an absolutely killer record. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's the perfect length, sitting somewhere between 36 to 40 minutes. And I like that the songs don't overstay their welcome. And, a lot of the times bands like this, they decide that just seemingly overnight, they decide that they are a progressive power metal act, and you start getting songs called like "The Journey Part 1" or the Liberation of Evilise Part 17 of the Volsung Saga or something crazy like that. And I think because they probably started off as more of a hardcore band, I could be wrong about that. This is just my guess, listening to their albums, that they may have started off in kind of more of a metalcore, hardcore type of direction. And I think that's part of the reason why the band is. I think that's part of the reason why the band is more grounded in kind of their traditional genre. And the epic elements aren't necessarily masterfully woven into the sound. I think this is more of like, hey, we're a hardcore band, or a deathcore band, but we also really like keyboards, so we're going to throw in stuff that we think sounds cool. And I think that's fun because it means that they're not up their own ass. This is one of the few bands that we listen to that has this level of like epic, like synthesizer driven style music that isn't completely just full of itself and thinking that they are the greatest band to ever grace the face of the earth. I don't think that they add finesse to deathcore, but I think that the stuff that they do does sound cool and it fits, and it's not shoved down my throat. You know, we don't have 18. You know, we don't have like 10. We don't have 18 tracks, but like 9 of them are, you know, piano instrumental passages.
If I could describe the keyboards on this album, they remind me of Vampire Hunter D. The anime is supposed to be dark and gothic and give you that futuristic vampire vibe. I know what I said. So now you have what is effectively above average deathcore, but we have to make it sound dark. We have to make it sound gothic. We have to give it that vibe that this isn't music that came from the top of the mountain. This isn't music that came from the middle of the mosh pit. This is music that was made somewhere in the bowels of a castle by someone who wasn't supposed to be writing deathcore, but decided that's what we're going to do this week. It just has that unique fantasy vibe. So it's challenging to the ear, at least for me, because I go in and out of what is the vibe of this album. Am I supposed to be hearing fantasy elements, or am I supposed to be hearing deathcore? It's something that, for me, is unique to Winds of Plague, and I really enjoyed it this week because it has some stereotypes in it, but it still gives and takes with other feelings that you're not expecting when you listen to this band.
Yeah, for sure. And so I like that. I like that kind of weaving kind of in and out of genres and trying new things without completely just going off the map. And as we roll into Against the World, this is the part of the discography where I kind of start feeling like maybe the band should have experimented a little bit more.
2011.
So Against the World is a Winds of Plague album that essentially they don't deviate, I guess, from their tried and true formula. And I mean, I don't know how else to say it. That is just kind of typical of the genre, because at this point, you know, they're trying to break through. I don't remember Winds of Plague being like the biggest band in the world or anything like that. And they're not like a lot of the heavy bands that were coming out around this time, you know, in the 2010s. These guys were they were much heavier, I think, than some of the other metalcore bands were. And, you know, they don't have clean choruses. This is not like an 18 Visions or something like that. They don't have kind of that hooky element. I don't think that their stuff is hooky at all, and I don't think that it's supposed to be. And it's how I prefer my deathcore. I don't want it to be, you know, like to the point where it's almost nu metal, you know, looking at you, Muir, looking at you, Impending Doom, you know. And it's not that I don't love nu metal, but I'd rather just listen to like a nu metal band do it, right? But with Winds of Plague, they are sticking to they're dying on that hill, not to be confused with the band A Hill to Die Upon. But they are they're gonna die on that hill. They're like, no, we have a really cool, compelling sound, and we're gonna give it to you over and over and over again until you get it.
This is the first time in the discography I thought, take the vocals out, and this is your next gothic anime soundtrack. Everything about this you've heard in your favorite action RPG video game of the last 20 years. You've heard it on insert name of series that plays on Adult Swim late at night. It's cool. I'm not taking anything away from the musicianship or the songs or the riffs. I'm really enjoying it. But this is the first time the deathcore vocals are there because that's what the lead singer wanted to do, not because the band was writing a deathcore album. And that's a weird dichotomy. That's like saying, I know you're going to come in and do that thing, but we wrote something different this week. Somebody must have been listening to the Trans-Siberian Orchestra and said, we can do this gothic-sounding classical music, but then it's going to have deathcore vocals, so no one's expecting that. It's going to be great. No one is expecting that.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately we were, but I think that, like...
I'm trying to give it some credit, and Dan's like, nope, saw it coming, guys.
That's not to slam the band at all, because I think that, like, and not to dip into my final thought like this early in the episode, but like I do feel like this is a band that we can't really make the same arguments about, have kind of the same points that we always do about like, well, you should have done this, or you should have done that, because I mean, up to this point, Winds of Plague has released 3 albums that are 100% rock solid. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm not like, oh, bad playing here, or the lyrics were stupid, or any of that. Like, I think that what they do very well. They're very tight with it. Everything kind of makes sense. They don't throw us for a loop. They don't do anything that's like super unexpected. And that's hard to talk about kind of in this format because, I can tell you all the records sound the same, and then you're going to be like, oh, man, you guys just absolutely slammed Winds of Plague. That's not what we did here. It's literally just that these guys have a really, really consistent sound that they're constantly trying to perfect, and they're not trying to deviate away from it because, I think anybody that's a musical person can relate to this. We like it. So that's why we do it like that, because we like it. And so, and I like it too. I like that first of all, I like that there's not like 12 albums that sound like this. I like that there's only 5, and so, I would say with Against the World, I think again, it's just one of those, I don't see a lot of progression from album to album. I mean, I think production wise, they sound better and better on each release. But this one right here, it's a little bit more deathcore, a little bit less kind of like hardcore metalcore, with some deathcore breakdowns thrown in there. And so overall, I think it's good. It's rock solid. Check it out. But as we go on, I'm sorry if this conversation seems to fall apart, but these guys are very, very consistent.
Is this one of those times where the flaw in deathcore shows its face? At the end of it all, there's only so much you can do with the concept of deathcore.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, because you do, I brought up Amur earlier, and they took it in a totally different direction, kind of going into more of a nu metal, sort of way. There's other bands that basically started off as deathcore and then went on to become basically hard rock bands, and that's being very generous. Some of them just went straight pop, because they got so popular, and then they were like, I think I'm done, with the breakdowns and with all of this stuff that all the kids are listening to now. Winds of Plague exists kind of in this other realm where it's like, they're kind of a band's band. They're on every good hardcore tour. They're on every good metal show. They're just not the opener. They're not the headliner. And it's not because they're not top quality. It's just that, when you would go to see a show like this, you might have forgotten that you saw Winds of Plague once 3 other bands have played after them. And that's not their fault. It's just that we live in a day and age now where, people like to book tours where every band on the tour sounds the same. So yeah, it's not their fault. I think that underrated is probably the word that I'm looking for here. I think Winds of Plague might be written off by other people as just another deathcore band, when in reality they're actually one of the best that I've heard. They're just not like they don't have a whole lot in the variation department, except they do. Like, their songs are actually very diverse, but it's diverse for Winds of Plague. Sorry, that's all I had to get out there.
Resistance is futile. 2013.
Kneel before resistance.
Kneel. Kneel.
Very different cover artwork on this one, and that may lead you to believe that the sound is different.
It's not.
It's not. This is the same Winds of Plague that you know and love, and they're not going to overstay their welcome. They have the best album lengths I've experienced on this show so far, I think, minus some of the grindcore bands. But I mean, if we get out of this episode at the same amount of time as a Winds of Plague album, I mean, we've done our job. But I think that this one I feel is heavier than what we've experienced from them in the past. The breakdowns hit harder. Could just be a production thing. But these songs are on the whole heavier. And I like the way, like, Left 4 Dead's probably my favorite song on this album.
That's a really good game.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, Left 4 Dead's probably my favorite song on it, just because I like the breakdown. I like the little piano kind of piece in it. And I like their like almost like thrash pace, hardcore, sort of speed on that song. They're really good at inserting kind of good vocal melodies isn't the right word to use, but just good vocal pattern, good vocal structuring, to kind of go from those hardcore barks to those kind of deeper deathcore, you know, and try spelling that for me.
U-R-R-R-R-R. Never mind.
Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Say hello to the Undertaker's a banger. I like this one quite a bit. I don't like it as much as the first record, but it's definitely a solid second for me. The songs just hit for me better. And again, it's one of those, like, they're so consistent that I cannot confirm nor deny whether it is superior or inferior to other releases from the band. It's just more Winds of Plague. It's the new Winds of Plague album, and if you like the old ones, you're going to be stoked for it.
No matter how fast this band goes, you can feel the pace of the song a little bit faster on this one, and I think that's an improvement overall. But like Dan said, it's deathcore. It's brick-walled in so many places. I can't tell you exactly why it feels different. It sounds like that deathcore album with some melodic keyboards used in places that Winds of Plague has been doing now for almost 10 years, or a little over 10 years by the time this came out. So where does this one stand for me? This week, listening to 5 albums that were arguably solid, I would put this one up there with the initial release. So this might be the secret of this band in hindsight. This is one of the albums you need to listen to get the full Winds of Plague experience. But don't mishear me. It's all good up to this point.
We're not trying to lead you astray either by being like, all right, guys, we're going to get to that album. There isn't one. There really isn't one. I mean, again, rock solid. And for all you people out there that complain that the episodes are too short, or for a band like this, I don't want to just talk just for the sake of talking. I want to be like Winds of Plague. I want to get in there. I want to get my point across, and I want to get out. And, sometimes that takes 2 hours, and sometimes that takes 40 minutes. But I can tell you that you really are not going to go wrong with this band. And I believe they went on a hiatus after this record came out, and just kind of went away for a while, whatever you want to call a hiatus. It wasn't really even that long as far as I remember. But I mean, they were basically gone, maybe just a couple of years. I know they toured, between this record, I think, all the way up until like 2015 or so. That was kind of peak time to see Winds of Plague out on the road. And they took a step back, they regrouped, they did the thing that they want to do. And I think that is awesome. So whenever we move on to their 2017 release,
Blood of My Enemy. So epic. It's going to be a bloodbath in here, man.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite cover so far from the band. And I'm trying to think right now if this is the mask from the first album. No, it's not. Okay, it's a different mask.
It does
Wasn't
look
sure,
like
though.
A giant samurai epic mask, like they were trying to guard the entire civilization, or it could just be a close-up. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but how does this record differ from the other Winds of Plague's album? I think that's the real challenge that we need to kind of overcome here.
It has an awesome opening track that is epic sounding, and
so do the other ones.
It has some seriously heavy metal style riffs. Dude screams into a barrel underwater, gets a nice sound to his voice while he's doing it.
Sounds refreshing.
The drumming on this one, it's almost like, yeah, it's all the same, man. I'm just going to say it. It's all the same.
It is all the same, but it's a good same. This is the kind of thing that metalhead elitists, this is all we actually really want, is we hear a band and we're like, okay, diehard metal fans usually aren't like, what else you got? I mean, maybe after a while they are. I don't know. I'm impossible to please.
Unplaceable metal fan, ladies and gentlemen.
I really, really, really like this record. It's the one that I listen to probably the most. for this, because I was trying to find something that would be different and better. And I think that the atmosphere on this record is a little bit more subtle. You know, you have songs like Snakeskin and Kings of Carnage that just kind of have a bit of a groove going to them. Like, it's a little bit different. I don't want to say that like it's the exact same. It's definitely the exact same enough for somebody to say, yeah, it's the same thing. But I feel like they were kind of, you know, hitting some grooves better, maybe trying to write catchier, slightly hookier riffs and sections. You have kind of like choir parts and stuff kind of thrown in there on Either Way You Lose. But for the most part, yeah, if you love Winds of Plague, you're gonna love Blood of My Enemy. I would question, you know, I don't think that every band that we talk about on the show has to be innovative. Really, a lot of our opinions on this show are based 100% on how these records made us feel overall. You know, like what I took away from it, or what I thought was strong about it. And whereas Winds of Plague maybe doesn't have a super interesting musical arc, you know, I also think there is something to be said about bands like this that are the backbone of this kind of music. Whereas, you know, sometimes I think people might think that we write off genres. It's not that we write off genres. It's just that it's easy to look at a genre like deathcore and feel that there's not a lot of substance to it. But then you've got bands like Winds of Plague that there actually is substance to it. And they didn't have to be a prog band or a super techie band in order to achieve that. It sounds like if you go to this band's shows, you're gonna hear a great set list coming from 5 different albums that all work together very well. You're gonna get in the pit, you're gonna scream along to the mic. That microphone's going out into the audience. People are gonna jump up on stage and jump off the stage, and you're gonna have an amazing time.
Do I get to throw elbows in this scenario?
Yeah, you may absolutely.
Sweet.
Yeah, overall, again, it's kind of another home run for these guys. They're not setting the world on fire by any means, but you'd be remiss to at least not check them out. Or you'd be remiss to check them out. Sorry, my bad. I said it backwards.
I don't think they need to light the world on fire in 2017. I think there's just some core fans that were waiting for the newest album. It had been a few years at that point. They toured their asses off, and they gave you more of that epic-sounding deathcore that you wanted. This album works, but where does it stand in their overall discography? I would say it's just below the first record and Resistance. It's the ultimate sound of this band in some ways, but it also doesn't have the same intensity. Again, it's those little production choices. We're going to mix the vocals just a little bit hotter on this one than we do on the other albums. So overall, it's all a home run. The whole discography is enjoyable, and I want everyone to listen to Winds of Plague. Final thoughts on this band, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, rock solid. I guess there's really no other way to put it. I know it's supposed to be wind, but it's rock, not rock music. My analogy's falling apart here. Winds of Plague is an amazingly solid band, I guess is what I have to say. I think that they're one of the better deathcore bands that I've heard, and I really enjoy their mix of epic with kind of that deathcore, hardcore aesthetic. I think that they make really, really good choices, because I know we've ragged on like, oh yeah, the records, they all sound the same. But they provide something that a lot of bands are not able to do. They're one of the few bands that can replicate what made me like them in the first place. They're able to do that one thing. You know, we joke that, you know, some bands like, oh, I only want you to do that one thing. That's why I got into your band. That was the hook for me. Winds of Plague is going to have that on every single release. You're not going to pick up a Winds of Plague album after hearing one song and be disappointed on what you're hearing. So I'd say overall, check them out, give them some support. They're one of my favorite bands we've talked about this year, just because of they're rock solid. I never got to a point where I was like, okay, let me go ahead and suffer through this one. It was an easy listen.
Winds of Plague will throw the wrench in the machine of deathcore that I was looking for in the mid-2010s. It all sounded the same at some point. It all had that brick wall sound that still exists in modern metal today, but it could be enjoyable from time to time. Then Winds of Plague shows up, and throws in some classic metal epicness that can only be described as they added keyboards and the dude knows how to play. For that, you will get something different. You'll also get some things that are the same, but you won't be able to focus in on what the formula is. They do what needs to happen on every song, and that is one of their best qualities. I want everyone to listen to this band. You're going to have a good time. Dan, what's your album of the week?
Oh, hands down, it is the heaviest album of all time by BROJOB.
That is one of the heaviest records ever made.
It is. It's amazing. It's BROJOB. What else do you want me to say? I mean, it's they can leg press 500 pounds with only one hand. Don't think about it. Just go with it.
Just go with it, he says. After listening to Def Leppard a few weeks ago and catching up on some Emery for last week, I found these strange folk, rock, bluegrass, blues bands that just do not fit into this podcast necessarily, but one I'm going to call out that is more of a story concept band than a we're going to sing about the same stuff you've always heard. The Dead South. They put out a record called Good Company, so shout out to Scott Bowling. This
Good
album
company.
is amazing.
Very nice. Very nice.
Take us out, DFT.
If you guys are watching or listening to this podcast and you would like to send us some band suggestions, there are a lot of ways that you can do that. You can always send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at discussmetal. And, make sure you're checking out Discuss Metal Dan on YouTube, where if you're listening to the podcast and for some reason you would like to see our faces, you can absolutely do that. There will be a link in the show notes for that. You can reach out to us on our Discord server, which has been hopping lately, let me tell you. Hard for me even to keep up half the time. But if you want to chat with us and give us band suggestions, that's the place to do it. There will be a link in the show notes that'll take you directly to our Discord server. And if you want to get some sweet Discography Discussion merch, you can go to our Teespring store. There will be a link to that in the show notes as well. And so if you want to get a classic logo Discography Discussion t-shirt, now is the time to do it because we have been exploding with new logos lately. And we want to get those on a t-shirt and on some socks and on some cell phone cases and anywhere else that you can slap the sweet Discography Discussion or Discuss Metal logo. Make sure you're checking out the Discuss Metal podcast, where we do interviews with musicians. Those are supposed to come out every couple of weeks. And so make sure to watch out for those here on YouTube. A lot of the time I will absolutely stream those live. And make sure you're checking out Discuss Metal Gaming, where myself and Discuss Metal Buddy are streaming games twice a week on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. And on Fridays, you will get an FPS podcast once a month. So be on the lookout for all that, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
And on that note, this has been episode 234 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Hey, Joe, I need some money.
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.